Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Slow Takes. I'm one of your hosts, Sam Illingworth, and as ever, I'm joined by...
Hello, I'm Leor from Exploring ChatGPT.
And I'm Sam from Slow AI. So thank you, everyone, for joining via YouTube or your podcast directory of choice or here live on Substack. Feel free to hammer the heart, the like, the whatever you want to let us know that you're enjoying the content. And for people new to us, basically every week, Leo and I sit down on a Monday, pick out 5 stories that have made the news in about AI this week, and then try to talk about them without any of the hype or BS that tend to, I guess, permeate through a lot of the mass media. There's a running challenge for me to try to find a good news story each week. I would say that I've failed spectacularly, and actually the 5th story this week is utterly depressing. So apologies in advance, trigger warning. We'll try to make light of the content. The first, in many ways though, the first story that we'll get to is such a joke that it makes everything else seem quite light. For people joining us in Substack as usual, hi Emily, hi Claire, hi Phyllis, hi Chad, hi Liz, loads of you joining. If you've got any comments or opinions, just feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll pick it up and get to it. And as usual, if you find us, drifting into hyperbole or BS, feel free to call us out on it. So, the first story this week. So the Zuck last week published a manifesto called "The Future is for Everyone, the Path to a Positive AI Future." And over the course of just over 6,500 words, Mark, that's how he signs it off to his friends, I guess, lays out what he envisaged to be a future AI for everyone. Now, I'm going to start off by being fair to the premise. And there's some stuff in the manifesto that I think both of us would probably get behind. Super intelligence is something that would potentially be very dangerous and needs to be thought about very carefully. Secondly, we need to make sure that it's not a couple of people making all of the decisions with regards to how AI looks going forward. And then thirdly, there needs to be some form of guardrails in place for AI, not just for super intelligence or general AGI, but just in general. These are all fair points. But they're written by one of the world's most powerful men. And it's clearly written in such a way as to say, yes, you can have all these things as long as we're the ones that are delivering them. And the thing that stood out most for me, more than anything else, I'm going to ask you the question, Leor, but I know you know the answer. In over 6,500 words, how many citations or sources or hyperlinks to any other material does Mark include?
You're asking me as if I read the manifesto?
Yes,
I didn't.
Have a guess. How many sources do you think for a 6,500 word manifesto? How many sources do you think he included?
I'll go with 0.
Correct, 0. So I just think, I wrote a piece about this last week, but if I handed in an essay as not even an undergraduate student, as a high school student that had 0 citations, my professors would be like, "What are you talking about? This is not even a manifesto. This is a complete polemic." So yeah, what an absolute joke. And the thing is, Leor, I went through it and pulled it apart, and there's so many claims in there that are just complete BS. Like one of them where it's talking about, we want Meta's going to provide every single person with a PhD level tutor. What are you talking about? How are you going to do that? And also, AI still hasn't got personalized learning right. It probably never will. And you're always going to need to have a structured human support there. And also, I don't know about you, but some of the PhD level tutors I've had before are not particularly great. The other thing that I took particular umbrage at was the fact that he was saying, yeah, we're going to be super secure with your data. this is meta we're talking about. Like, hello, Cambridge Analytics. Hello, WhatsApp. Hello, what was the story we've covered multiple times with like Instagram being hacked? Like, this is not an organization that I think can say anything confidently with regards to its AI security. And as a couple of people have put in the chat, why even with AI, you could just run 1,000 citations in there straight away. I will. Final point from me, Leor, I will say I did run this past an AI detector,
I was going
uh,
to ask. Yeah,
and yeah, and it did actually came back as 100% human, which for me is perfect evidence that AI detectors do not work because, as we know, the Zuck is not 100% human.
correct.
I don't. He's either a shark or or like a cyborg sent from the future. So the final nail in the AI detection coffin is that for some unknown reason, it marked this 6,000 word manifesto of complete and utter tripe as being 100% human. Anyway, that's my fair and balanced take on the future is for everyone, and I'd love to hear your take on it as well.
That's truly a fantastic take, especially the last part. I was gonna ask you if you like pangrammed or AI detected his manifesto, and you kind of just flipped that in a really nice way. So that was cool. Um, I personally think, with all due respect to Zuck, incredible businessman, incredible smart guy. I think he's being a little bit of a salty Sally. Like he's a little jealous, in my opinion. Um, Meta was at the forefront of AI, like in the beginning. Then they went down another road. They went to the multiverse, spent billions and billions of dollars on that. That didn't work. So I think he's upset that his company is not at the forefront, and he's trying to play catch up, which at this point he just can't, even with all the money that he has. Um, so I think that even though I do agree with some points, like open models, etc. Um, I think if his company was OpenAI, he wouldn't be writing this manifesto. Um, and and yeah, basically, I truly feel like he sees what's coming in the near future, which is Meta will at some point not be in the top 10 biggest companies in the market, uh, as we continue down this road. And I think he's actually trying to disrupt their business model. And I think it's very clear the main way that we've seen, even coming from China as well, to disrupt Anthropic and OpenAI is to release these open weight models, and that's it. That's I think that's the path that we're seeing him try to go down.
Absolutely. And he talks in his manifesto about they've paused open weight models and they're going to be opening it again soon. Like, how convenient, right? And like their open weight models were absolute junk as well. And like we should be fair here. Like Fatima puts a really good point in the chat that Dario and Modi also wrote a long essay full of which was full of references, but almost all of them were pointers to his own publications or relatively unreliable opinion articles. And I think this points to a wider pattern that I've noticed across all of the frontier labs. A lot of them put out white papers or publications on Archive, which is a preprint server. Almost none of them have gone through independent peer review. So a lot of these research papers are put out there as research, whereas what they are is it's somebody doing work that hasn't been independently verified. And I think we're going to be seeing lots and lots more of these manifesto type statements coming out from Altman, from Modi, from Zuck, from God. I'm just thinking about what Musk's is going to be like, and and none of them are rigorous at all. He. I'm almost lost for words because it's not even that it's so poorly cited. He fancies himself as some kind of grand philosopher that when he's writing this, you can imagine him just being like, "Oh, this is so smart," and everyone's going to think I'm so clever for writing this. But it's just not. It's absolute junk, and I really hope that people start to see through it. I've seen like quite a lot of um pretty like bad takes on it in the press and people pulling it apart as well as saying like, what is this? And I feel as though, like you say, Leor, the tide is turning for Meta, and I'm yet to be convinced of any of their steps with regards to AI that makes me think that Meta's gonna be a big player in this field in 2 or 3 years' time.
Yeah. I want to add one more thing. If anybody's ever seen the podcast Dumb Money, um, and the host Jason something, he has a lot of connections in this space, and he made a really good comparison between Zuck and Altman, and he said they're actually very similar. Um, knowing knowing them and knowing the people around them, um, I truly believe that if you rewind and if Zuck was in Altman's place and now OpenAI, which is pretty much the opposite of what they are. They started as this open for everybody company, and now it should be closed AI is really what it should be. But so if Zuck was in that same position, he would have done the same exact thing. So, and you see how he built Facebook and Meta up from the ground up, and all the steps that he took, all the people that he cut out of the equation, he would have done the same thing. So I think it's just simply because he's not in that position that he feels this way.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I mean, I would say I'd encourage people to read the manifesto, but it's 2 or 3 hours of your life you're not going to get back. So I wouldn't worry. Instead, read my post that pulls it apart and look at the actual peer-reviewed research that points to it. I will link it because it's funny and it's a great. If you're an educator, it's a great text to show to your students exactly what an essay should not look like, basically. So going to move on to the second news story for today then. And, it feels like we've been talking about AI detection forever, but basically Claude came out with a pretty important statement last week, I think, and that's Claude is going to be introducing AI watermarking. Now, this is it's based on the Synth ID protocol that was developed by Google DeepMind, a few years ago. And this is different from AI detection in that basically Claude has said that in its text, there's going to be a watermark where if you've got a key, which Claude only has the key at the moment, Anthropic only have the key, at the other end, you can determine for certain or close to certain whether it's written by AI or not. Now, how this works in practice is that basically they've said there'll be certain words or phrases or combinations of words and phrases that when they appear is a signal that it's being used, that AI has been used to write this text. In fairness to them, they say it's not foolproof, that there'll be ways around it. And a couple of substackers I've been speaking to this week, they've had some really novel ways of getting around this. That one of the easy ways is just ask Claude every synonym that you've used, use another synonym in that instance, which is a really smart way of getting around it. But this is different from a typical AI detection software. So AI detection software like Pangram, to give them another mention, that basically looks for AI tells, which, as we know, doesn't work. It looks for the most predictable next letter that's going to happen. This is actually at the source. This is a way of marking on the text whether or not it was created by AI. Now, I think it's potentially a good thing. The reason why I think it's a good thing is that I'm vehemently, as you know, against AI detection, and I think this rips the market out a little bit of that AI detection industry. And certainly should rip the market out of that humaniser industry. So those AI detectors where you go on, you put your work in, it comes up with a bogus score, then it offers to humanise it for you. What I will say though is that it still feels a little mealy-mouthed, Leor. It feels a little bit like a box-ticking exercise to appease Congress. And it will be really interesting to see what steps may or may not be taken with regards to the EU AI Act, which is much stronger. And also worth reading in parallel with the fact that, just this week, last few days, in fact, Google have said that they are now going to offer people the opportunity to remove the watermark from their AI generated images. So I think it's a really interesting piece of work. I hope that it helps to rip the market out of those, insidious and predatory humaniser and AI detection tools. But I do worry that it will still lead to some element of a witch hunt as well going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, me personally, I'd actually much rather have a Claude assisted with this than a detector telling you this is 97% AI. That's my personal opinion. And also, I think, as I've seen the chat here, like this should have been done probably from the start. We would have avoided the whole AI detector thing. Um, but I think we're seeing this shift now, and we're going to see this in our a couple of our next stories as well. We're kind of going from detection to, I would call it like a forced transparency.
Yeah,
Usually, I don't like when you're forcing anybody into anything, but in a way, I can kind of get behind this because most people are not transparent for one reason or the other. And obviously, there's ways to get around it for now, but that can be patched. So, especially with people showing how you can get around it, like you mentioned the synonym example. So, yeah, in my opinion, I'm honestly all for this. I'm totally cool with this.
exactly. Or like as Pappy Jack says in the chat, all you have to do is ask another AI to remove the watermark of another AI. I mean, it just
Yeah,
literally becomes a robber. It's like, the AI that ate itself. And I think Leo and I have always been upfront about this, that we're quite open about our own, use of AI assisted writing, AI assisted work. And for me, really similar to you, Leo, I wouldn't force anything on anyone. But what I would is encourage that dialogue and that debate and have it open the open. And then if people decide that they don't want to read my work because it's AI assisted, that's fine. And if people decide that they want to pay a premium for something that is 100% human, then that's fine as well. For me personally, I could not care less if something was AI assisted or not. Like something's either good or it's not. And I think the perfect example is the story we've just covered, right? Like that manifesto from Zuckerberg is allegedly 100% human. But for me, it is the dictionary definition of the word slop. It's completely unnecessary. It has no grounding in reality and it doesn't need to exist. Like that's what slop is. Lots of us use AI. I mean, and I always feel like I'm not an apologist for using AI. Lots of us use it as a way to help us better develop our writing skills and our critical thinking skills as well. Like none of the people we talk to are one-shotting entire articles or books. And that stuff's bogus and no one wants to read that. No one wants to read that, but you're right. Hopefully this is a further step towards dragging the dialogue and discussion around AI assisted work into the open. And my prediction here, like as a bit of a hot take, I guess, is that in the next probably within the next 2 years, maybe next 18 months, people are going to care less about this. Like that it's just going to be, okay, this is great work. It's got a little flag in it that says it's AI assisted. That's fine. But I think it's almost manufacturing an issue in many of these instances as well. But yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on that point as well.
yeah. I actually think that timeline could be a lot shorter.
Okay.
I think we're already feeling that somewhat now. It's hard to say though, because we're kind of in this bubble. So I think a lot of the people that our algorithm on Substack or whatever social media, we're being fed this algorithm of people that think like us, which is a whole another issue in and of itself. Um, but I think I'm already feeling that I, a lot of people really don't care. They just it's do you like the content or not? Do you like the idea behind what you're reading or not? Do you like the idea behind what you're seeing people build with AI or not? So yeah, I think we're actually already there.
Yeah. And yeah, just final point for me, like I think it becomes exhausting when you spend half your time trying to work out if something's written by AI or not, rather than just enjoying the article. And I think that people will, be grateful for that offloading in many ways.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, cool. So next story then is this is yeah, again going on to like the watermark really. So Spotify now is going to distinguish AI artists from real people and stop recommending them. So, this comes about because there's quite a few Spotify accounts who allegedly have made a lot of money, like a lot of money, like hundreds of thousands of dollars through streaming. And it's turned out that it's completely AI generated content. And a lot of this has then been flooding people's feeds and then has been messing with the algorithm so that, you then end up getting recommended a load of actual AI slop versus stuff that people have maybe, like an independent musician who spent months putting something together. And again, I think there's a range here, right? There's like people who use AI to help edit, to help like synth, to help record versus people who just are like going into like an AI tool of choice and saying, write me a song and publish it to Spotify. So I personally, this is a really interesting story. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how Spotify decide whether or not something is generated by AI. And again, is it going to be up to the artist to declare that? Or is it going to be something that ends up with other people putting labels on something that just isn't true? But would love to hear your take on this as well.
Yeah. I think actually the platforms themselves are becoming the judge and the jury in terms of how much of this was AI or human involvement. Um, and I think we're seeing this across multiple platforms. I've definitely felt it on YouTube. We're seeing it everywhere. We spoke about LinkedIn with AI slop, now Spotify. We're seeing this across the board. Substack. This is a common occurrence that we're seeing across pretty much every social media platform at this point. They're all kind of following along with each other. And I think my main issue with this is the algorithmic punishment. So, first of all, how can a platform at scale, like let's say with Spotify, how many artists are on Spotify? It's an incredible amount of artists. How do you know if the artist used ChatGPT to help them write a song and then they sung the song? And now where does that qualify in terms of are they going to be punished for that or not? Um, that's going to be a tough cookie to crack. So I think also the problem with algorithmic punishment is that they're using AI algorithms to punish people that are using AI.
Yeah, I mean,
It's like
the
the
irony
snake that's eating its
stacks.
own
Yeah,
tail.
yeah, exactly right. It's a robberist. Like that's exactly what it is. I mean, I think Chad makes a really good point here. Chad, it's a really excellent point. Chad says that does this mean that AI music wasn't slop? I mean, if it gets the streams, is the market voting with their time? And actually, I think it's a really great point that maybe a lot of this is people being, um, snobbish about what they consider to be good music or what they consider to be good writing. And if a few people are making those decisions with regards to what is good, then why would listen to that? Some people might might want to just listen to this. And if it's creative, if a fully one-shotted track on Spotify is raking in hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe it's good. Like it might not be something that we want to listen to, but it's something that many other people do. So I think that's a really, really good point. I also love the point just off market here as well that Bruno Batati says, imagine if Carl Sagan was alive and in charge of AI development. I mean, yes, imagine if Carl Sagan was just alive, full stop, who's, one of the greatest scientists and science communicators of our time and the late 20th century as well. So I also think, Leor, it's going to be really interesting to see how this came about. So I imagine with many social media platforms, Substack included, a lot of this push for AI detection probably came from people who were making large amounts of money and wanted to protect their investment, really. And I would imagine that on Spotify, it's going to be similar. It'll be certain artists and musicians who are pushing for the fact that this is eating into their market share of that capital. So exactly how that's done, and whether or not it's like AI cube. There's an AI machine making AI music, which is then going onto a platform that is using AI to create an algorithmic recommendation tool, which is then using AI to ascertain whether or not the original track was written by AI. Just silly. It's just
Yeah.
so silly.
Yeah.
But I do think that because Spotify is such a big company, the decision that they make to do this will almost certainly be replicated or used elsewhere as well.
Yeah. It already is. I think we spoke about this even off stream with YouTube. And I think one of our theories was that YouTube, um, they're decreasing your reach. They're decreasing the amount of impressions that you're going to get, and we're going to see the same thing on Spotify. So basically, if the platform thinks that there's AI involved, now this is the problem with AI algorithms. Sometimes it's hard for them to discern if is it me and Sam talking about AI related news, AI related topics, versus a channel that's putting out faceless AI content with AI generated, voice. So it's kind of hard to discern, and then everybody gets basically punished along the way.
So, changing tack slightly, then, this is another story that we've kind of covered before, but as in we've covered the company, but not this particular take. So, for American listeners in particular, you'll be familiar with Flock now, which is a surveillance company which has over 100,000 surveillance cameras that use AI to find out information about car registration plates. And there's been lots of writing about this in the press because of issues around privacy and identity. And Leor and I talked about the fact that the very polls themselves also maybe might be causing a road traffic violation. Now, what has transpired is that the guardrails that have been put in place for using this technology have been a joke. And what's happened is that some police officers, not all, obviously, have been illegally using the Flock cameras to follow their exes. And it used to be for basically stalking. So, back in the day, imagine if you were running someone's plates on a piece of software in the police station, it's illegal to do that without actual cause. Like, you can't just run someone's plates because it's like someone that you used to date or something like that. Now, what they're doing now is that with Flock, all you had to do to justify why you were running someone's plates using the AI surveillance equipment was there was a single box that you would type a reason for in. And some of these police officers were literally just writing in he. Now, this is a problem with police corruption in this particular instance, rather than just the technology. But there's no way that that the tech should be set up in such a way that you can just have access to that technology if you're a police officer, and all you have to do is type anything into the box. Allegedly, new guardrails have been put in place, but again, there's works around in that system. So, yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on this take, Leor.
Yeah. Before I give my true opinion on this, I will say I absolutely support any piece of technology that can reduce crime. That's number one. But I think that, setting that aside for a second, I don't like the future that we will have with this. To state it simply, for lack of a better word, I don't want a surveillance state. I especially don't want a venture-backed national surveillance state. We spoke about Flock, I think in the last stream, and I mentioned the investors, private equity firms that are involved in this. It's a lot of the same names that you've seen before, with a lot of crossover into other companies that you may or may not support. I won't get too deep into that, but I actually, when I read this story, Sam, I actually had to dig in a little bit, because I'm like, okay, well, this company already got a bunch of money. Their year over year growth was like 70%. Is there some type of quota involved here that we've heard about before, like with police officers in general? You have to pull over a certain amount of people. And I guess to maybe justify these Flock cameras, maybe there's a certain quota that has to be met to justify them. And so just a little bit of research on that. So technically, it's an important clarification. It's the justification field is what they call it. It's not technically a quota. It doesn't mean that I don't feel that this may exist in some way. But yeah, like Sam mentioned, the he that was found 20 times, and they used like a generic word like investigation 111 times, and that satisfied the safeguard. Uh, so yeah, just to wrap up again, I don't want a national surveillance state. Um, and I don't know what would be worse, if it was fully government funded or if it's venture back. So.
I mean, the thing is as well, that whoever set up like the coding for this process, like it's probably AI's helped them do it. It's literally all they've done is had a binary 0, 1 to pass that check. Is there something written in this box? If so, continue. If not, do not allow. I mean, it's like the most basic thing possible that, you know, I could have coded when I was like 6 years old or something. That is absolutely crazy. So yeah, I think guardrails are a bit of a joke a lot of the time. And a lot of this again stems back to education. You can have the best possible technology in place, but if you've still got police officers or other people working for you who want to use that technology in that way, they will find a way. And the best way to do it is to both have the technology that makes it possible to report and to stop, but also to upskill the people using this technology in the first instance to point out exactly why they shouldn't be using it for this reason. So moving on to the final story then this week, which is definitely not a good news story, unfortunately. And this is that Amazon is, I mean, there's so much in the news at the moment about data centers. And like, from what I've read, Leor, like data centers are going to play a huge role in the midterms as well, like a huge role in the midterms. And the largest data center, one of the largest data centers in the US is going to be built by Amazon in, again, you can mock me on my American pronunciation now, in what I would say is Pecos County, Texas. And it's so big that it's going to have its own power plant to power it, because the national and local grid cannot sustain it. Now, they're going to use a natural gas power plant, which obviously then has huge amounts of carbon dioxide emissions. This is going to generate up to 33 million tons of carbon dioxide annually, which means it would be the biggest polluting power plant in the country for anything. And this is for a single data center, like admittedly a massive data center in Texas. Now, that's obviously horrific, but then the hypocrisy of Amazon pledging to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2040, those two just don't square up at all. Now, the climate crisis is real. The climate crisis is happening. And what worries me is that with these data centers, we have a new issue that literally did not exist 5 years ago. And something that's created that is becoming the biggest power plant in the US to train models, to enable people to use AI for whatever reasons they want. That is huge. And I don't think it's good, but I would love to hear your take on it as well.
Yeah, I actually think that um, in the near future, closer than most people think, we're going to see this infrastructure become obsolete. It's almost going to become like the horse stable versus the automobile factory.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion. We've touched on like quantum in the past before. I'm not an expert. We've touched on solar. And I think actually what we're going to see is that we're going to be using AI to become more energy efficient. And when things like this happen, regardless of what Amazon's goal is by 2040, I think that it's going to be clear as day that we're doing this all wrong. So, it would, like, for example, regardless of how you feel about Elon Musk, some people think this idea is nutty, but to have data centers in space. And in general as well, solar. I mean, once we can actually figure out how to harness solar properly, um, that's just another example of why using natural gas to power these data centers is going to become obsolete very quickly. Using quantum computing to basically make a lot of these data centers not necessarily obsolete, but close to it as well. I think it's closer than a lot of people actually realize. I think actually I have a number here from the DOE, Department of Energy. Um, so scientifically useful fault tolerant quantum computing by 2028, and then into the 2030s plus. So that's closer than it seems. And I think what we're seeing more so now is a lot of these timelines are getting shortened. I think it really depends on what we use AI for. And I think that if we can if we can come together and realize we should be using AI to become more energy efficient, we're gonna have all the compute that we need and even more, and we're gonna find more things to do with that compute as well.
I think what's really interesting here is that I agree that the data centers as they stand now are going to be obsolete in 5 years, 6 years for many reasons. I think that the reason that they're being built in many ways is part of the house of cards on which the whole AI economy is built. And if you look at the money that's being leased and used and bet against each other in this completely, not even like circular, but cannibalistic economy, they require the building of these AI data centers to make the money, which then they can pump back into the valuations and keep the whole charade going. So in many ways, it's not in their best interests to divest into other resources or alternatives that might exist. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see what these companies are doing in public and what they're doing behind closed doors as well. And, you know, the smart money, yeah, as Jim says, like data centers in space is like, it's a little bit like, you know, moon elevators, a little bit out there, but there are some like genuinely innovative solutions, certainly around quantum computing, just around like how we can use solar energy, but just actually how to use AI more effectively and how computers can work, moving away from everything being on a binary 0-1 switch into something more of a quantum state. That is genuinely going to revolutionize the playing field. And it feels a little bit like last days of Rome with some of these companies, like putting up these huge effigies to just keep the lights on, literally. And for me, I think that's extremely poor stewardship, not only for the companies, but also for, you know, for the planet that we inherit as well. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. And then also, what are we going to be left? What's going to be left with all of these with all of these factories and all of this pollution as well, right? It's that this does worry me a little bit.
Yeah, I can definitely see it all being left behind at some point. And initially, when I heard the story of data centers in space, I kind of laughed at it as well. But then when you actually think about it, whoever actually gets that done, uh, I mean, you're going to be the one leaving all these companies behind. So there's a monetary incentive in that as well. And at the end of the day, everything is for money. So eventually, we're going to push in that direction, one way or the other. Someone's going to do it.
Mm. So yeah, just waiting to see that the next stage will be quantum AI, and we know that people are working on it. It'll just be interesting to see, and it's just, for me, it's just a shame that the people in charge of these companies don't, like, they think profit above everything else. Which, I guess that's why they are where they are, rather than two guys talking on Substack on a Monday, right? That's probably the difference.
I actually like what Chad said there. Let them spend the money. Like, there's so many contractors and workers getting paid right now. That's also very true. And we also have a lack. There's a lack of contractors, electricians, plumbers. So anybody that is maybe considering not going into higher education, that's probably a good path to take right now.
Yeah, exactly. And the final point for me, like John Bruton in the chat, who has a fantastic Substack called Operating, and who knows a lot about the economy and what he's talking about, says that Elon and SpaceX is the logical company to make that happen. And I think, as everyone knows, I have issues with Elon, but I think you're right, John. I think you look at what he's building, and also how we've talked in the past, Leor, about the fact that he's leasing out these data centers to Claude, etc. Like, SpaceX is going to be obviously one to watch going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then very, very final point from me, just people talking about blue collar work. Yes, absolutely. But let's not get dragged into it. This is not Flint, Michigan. We're not building like automobile companies factories that will employ thousands of people. Data centers will employ thousands of people to build them, But then to run them, no, they won't. They don't require hardly any staff at all. So all I'd say is when you hear that argument from your politicians, especially as we come up to election cycles, just look into what they actually mean by creating jobs and exactly how long that's going to be. And the perfect loop then back to the first story we had was in Zuck's manifesto. He makes this exact point that the data centers, he says the data centers are going to provide loads and loads of wealth for the people nearby. And he states this one example. And the one example he gives is actually a country. It's actually like a local county where, yes, wages have gone up, but that's because they sensibly invested and tied a percentage of like effectively capital gains to the local population. So that in a way, it doesn't nothing to do with Facebook. And again, another example of presenting a manifesto on your own polemic rather than anything that's been rigorously researched in the past. So yeah, sorry we didn't end on a good news story. I do try. I promise you, I try every single week, and then something supplants it. It's just my British pessimism. That's just what it is. I need some of that good old US of A spirit. I'll think about it for next week. So thanks very much everyone for listening. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. If you've been watching the YouTube, which we have a channel for, thank you for that. Leor's just going to throw that into the chat. Thanks everyone for joining us on Substack, like well over 100 views again. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all your commentary. I'll put up the post for this in the next couple of hours. Leor, thanks as ever for your time and companionship. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate you.
And stay safe, everyone. Be well and go slow.
Bye now.